The simple farm game that broke record after record and became the most played game in the whole planet, surpassing even Fortnite by a massive difference of concurrent players, reaching its peak record of over 22 million players, averaging more than 2 million per day, has already lost more than half of its players, with even its own main developer JANDEL looking for ways to revive GOAT. And in this video, you will see all the reasons and the bad decisions that were made that led to this tragic downfall. Mainly regarding the inflation of the shekels currency and the absurd duplication exploits that completely cooked the game's economy. And that is exactly what brings us to the first point of this decline. When the amount of money skyrockets within an economy, it loses the value you once had, making the price of everything rise and become more expensive to match the low value of the currency. And this directly affects the arrival of new players, since everything will be expensive for them and their money will be worth less. While the players who already had sextillions don't even feel this impact. Several reasons led to the extreme inflation of shekels in GOAT, but the main one was definitely the addition of the most beloved and iconic pet in the game, the raccoon. Its ability to duplicate plants infinitely worked like a shekel sprinter, and several people in private servers would even rent their gardens with a single plant of absurd value, like a candy or a bone blossom, or even the 700 trillion honeysuckles, for you to spend hours duplicating those plants with your raccoon. So imagine the amount of new and even old players frustrated after spending weeks or months grinding the game honestly to reach 100 trillion shekels, while another player spends 4 hours duplicating quadrillions of shekels through a rented plant in a private server, injecting huge amounts of money into the economy and making the devs choose to increase the price of all items in an attempt to keep up with the mountain of shekels that player had duplicated, inflating the game's economy and devaluing its own currency. But in doing so, you punish those players who play the game honestly and make them lose the will and excitement of the grind, since until you have a good amount of shekels, they won't be worth anything anymore, thanks to the inflation. And you also kill the interest of new players. It's not only unfair or harmful to your own game, it's completely poorly balanced and executed. A simple solution that would have helped with this issue and was suggested by the community was simply adding a nerf to the raccoon's ability, one that made it possible to duplicate each plant only once, avoiding the cloning of those plants with absurd values in an unlimited and broken way. But not only did they fail to fix this gigantic problem for the economy while there was still time, they doubled it with the addition of another pet with the same duplication ability as the raccoon, the kitsunes, I don't know. And along with them also came the biggest backlash involving the game's microtransactions up to that point, and many associated this episode with GOAT's involvement, specifically JANDEL's, with the most destructive company known in Roblox. DOBIG Studios, known by many as the Ripper of games, as everyone already knows, is a company with a history and a certain connection to JANDEL that buys games with extreme potential and takes over everything from marketing to development, investing heavily. All that just to turn the game into the most pay-to-win casino known in the history of mankind. It acquired games like a Blade Ball, a Dusty Trap, which was initially bought by JANDEL and after some time handed over to DOBIG's development, apparently after JANDEL received hate for making the game too pay-to-win. DOBIG also acquired part of Still a Brainrot, The Great Fish, and eventually a part of GOAT, together with JANDEL. And the Kitsune was the first prismatic pet in the game, and up until then the most OP, being an even more broken version of the raccoon, because besides also duplicating plants, he could still apply a mutation with a 190x multiplier, which was insane at the time. The problem was that all the best pets by default had a 1% chance of being obtained, which was already extremely low, but the Kitsune came with a ridiculously absurd and unbelievable chance of only 0.08%. Not 0.8%, it was 0.08%. To give you one idea, at 1% chance you will need on average 100 attempts to get one, but at 0.08% chance you will need on average 1000 250 attempts. The backlash from the community was astronomical and instant because of this absurd and even surprising scam, since, of course, Grow a Garden already had its microtransactions, but until then, nothing on such a bizarre, out-of-this-world and unfair level. This resulted in players wasting a lot of time grinding trying to get a kitsune before the event ended, or players spending thousands and thousands of Robux also trying to get one, and not even coming close because of this almost insignificant chance. It ended with JANDEL publicly apologizing on the Discord server for not respecting the community with this completely pay-to-win scam, giving players PTSD from the time when the combination of JANDEL plus DOBIG ruined a dusty trip with infinite microtransactions. And to this day, many people believe that this was nothing more than a suggestion from DOBIG Studios, since as an investor, they also have to make their profit somehow. But JANDEL ended up backtracking after the huge backlash from the community, though the profit from this casino had already been made and the damage had already been done. And now there were 2 economy-breaking pets circulating in the game. But even if you kept all the abilities of those pets that are extremely broken, it would be fine because they are extremely rare to get, right? No. Grow a Garden also suffered from another problem that turned out to be even bigger and more harmful than the duplication of infinite shackles using the unlimited abilities exploits of the kitsune and the raccoon. The duplication of the kitsunes and raccoons themselves. Thousands of them were duplicated using a duppy glitch at the time, which ended up making them being distributed and sold in bulk to other players, who used those 2 clone pets precisely to clone monstrously valuable plants from players in private servers, and keep farming and injecting infinite shackles into the game. The most impressive part is that this turned into an extremely profitable business for the duplicators of those pets, since thousands of them were sold on big platforms like the famous eBay. And many of them were sold. Many. Once again, this could have been easily avoided with the implementation of a unique code identification system for each in-game item. This would make each item in the game have a kind of unique tag code. And then, as soon as the system detected that something was duplicated and that there were 2 identical items with the exactly same code, it would easily flag this duplicated item, making their detection easier, but this was not done in time. And to try to fix this non-stop duplication, the devs completely disabled the possibility of gifting pets for an indefinite time, making many players frustrated about it, because trading pets in the game had always been one of the core mechanics of the game, until finally they fixed the glitch and reactivated pet trading again, but the damage had already been done once more, and this time infinitely duplicated. Literally. And when the economy was already completely cooked, a popular system was implemented that has a few different names depending on the game. The most famous ones being Prestige, Rebirth, Soft Reset, or in the case of Grow a Garden, Ascension. The system is used in several other games where the progression stalls after players accumulate too much of the game's unique currency over time, leaving the numbers absurd and creating a huge economic gap between new and old players. So the games implement the system, creating a new layer in the economy with a new currency and new things to be bought with this new currency. And the players obtain this new currency by trading the old one for it, resetting their current progress. But besides receiving a good amount of new coins in exchange, since they had many old coins, they also receive buffs or other permanent things in the game, making them not feel like they lost their fortunes for nothing. And Grow a Garden tried this with Ascension, but it was a complete disaster. Many players didn't even know what the so-called reset system was about, and the interface of Ascension didn't help at all. Yes, it was written that the player would lose all their shackles for just 1 new coin, but below in the requirements there was a fixed number at 1 trillion, and many people thought that this was the number of shackles you would lose when ascending, but that was actually just the minimum shackles requirement needed to ascend. This resulted in thousands of players instantly deleting all the shackles they had, and regardless of how many shackles it was, they would still only get 1 single new coin. And because this wasn't clear for many players, this was exactly what caused the biggest drop in player count in the game up to that point, purely out of frustration for having lost all their shackles for basically nothing. They felt like they had lost everything they had achieved up to that point, and also they felt tricked. Later, this was adjusted, making it fairer and easier to understand, giving 10 new coins for just 1 trillion shekels, and not everything you had for just 1 coin like before. But by then, it was already too late. Many people had lost all their shekels and the will to play, leading to the biggest drop in player in the game so far. Even a poll ended up being made by JANDEL on Discord between modifying the requirements or just removing the Ascension mechanic entirely, which was clearly winning, by the way. But it could not be done without creating another problem, because simply removing it would harm a lot of people who were farming this new currency, making all their work useless. So it wasn't that easy to just remove the whole mechanic. That's why, to compensate, JANDEL promised good rewards for those who had lost all their shekels in this poorly made Ascension. But by then, it had already caused a lot of damage in the community again. Before we proceed into this next sensitive topic, I just want to say that this is the channel's first video, and it would mean a lot to us if you subscribe to encourage us to keep bringing high quality content like this video here. Thank you. Now back to it. JANDEL has always been the main figure of Grow a Garden, frequently posting on his TikTok, often interacting on his Discord server, was also 90% of the times the main character of the admin abuses. And in general, in everyone's view, he was a cool guy with strong principles, hate-proof, and also the developer and fully owner of our favorite game. But not even he escaped the apparently inevitable expose that sooner or later always ends up happening. Several users on X and even huge YouTubers like Parlo took part in this expose of JANDEL. Well, in fact, it's more about someone JANDEL has in his close circle, Adrian, known as BMW Lux, the original creator of Grow a Garden. To give context, it all started with people digging up an old tweet from JANDEL in October 2024, saying that he would stop acquiring games and focus on his own projects, because he felt like he needed to prove to himself that he was capable of creating his own top-tier games without needing to buy games from other developers, just to continue and fix them, and that this practice of buying games was starting to get too toxic for him to be part of. However, a few months later, in April 2025, JANDEL would break his own word by buying his share of Grow a Garden from the original creator, BMW Lux, which already made many people doubt JANDEL's character and word after seeing this post of his. This even generated repercussion at the Roblox Innovation Awards, when the host, Jay Party, asked JANDEL the following question.
So JANDEL, as a professional maker of subpar games, would you say your parents are extremely or moderately disappointed in you?
Moderately?
I'd have to agree. You won't see a shrink about that. Anyway.
And of course, it was a joke. But that didn't stop the public opinion reaction in saying that this was actually a fact. And others like this saying, well, it's not like JANDEL even makes his own games, most are bought. Or this one saying, calling him creator is crazy, considering he bought his way to success. The second part of this exposed came from the fact that JANDEL doesn't own 100% of the game, and that 50% of Grow a Garden still belongs to BMW Lux, very possibly making him the partner with the largest percentage of the game, since the other 50% is divided between JANDEL's company and also DOBIG Studios. But BMW Lux also had his own exposed, being unmasked as a doxer, scammer, false DMCA abuser, and leaker of other people's games for years, with multiple proofs showing how pathetic and in bad faith Adrian behaved in the developer circle. And then you probably ask me, but what does this have to do with JANDEL? He doesn't go along with any of that. He just bought the game from Adrian. It's just business. And I would even agree with you if it weren't for the multiple messages from JANDEL defending Adrian, where he tried to soften the extensive pattern of disgusting actions from Adrian over several years, both as a game developer and also as a human being, and always hammering the argument that everyone makes mistakes when they are young. And Adrian was young at the time and still is. And by the way, he was 16 when he created Grow a Garden. And also saying that he is a good kid who is committed to correcting his mistakes and becoming a trustworthy figure in the community, even though Adrian never publicly apologized nor compensated his mistakes with all the people who showed proof of the despicable actions he committed against them. this was a clear attempt by JANDEL to soften and clean up the image of his partner, because how could you not defend and maintain a good relationship with someone who holds 50% of your most profitable business? As business partners, they need to have a good relationship with each other. But their transactions were not just small mistakes like JANDEL made them seem. Among the many things Adrian did, there were episodes like stealing all the revenue of a developer he agreed to do a 50-50 split partnership with, and even doxing this developer by threatening to leak his address, house photos, and personal information after he had been exposed. He also took down games with false DMCA claims, bringing down the original game and creating a copy of the game and stealing the entire audience, and much more. And this went on for multiple years with several other developers that he also screwed over. And JANDEL, who is also a developer just like all of Adrian's victims, defending this kind of person with the shallow excuse that he was too young and we all make mistakes when we are young, as if that justified it, downplaying the seriousness of these actions and saying that he is committed to correcting his mistakes, even though Adrian never made any public apology, was a very unfortunate event for those who saw JANDEL as a figure of principles. People felt that JANDEL put his principles aside for business ambition by defending someone who caused so much harm to people with the same professional JANDEL has, the famous damage control. They are partners despite everything, and apparently that comes first. And many of you may not even know, but the official Grow Garden Discord server was just as active as the game itself. It had several interaction channels, chaotic voice chats, among many other things. But the best one, without a doubt, was the suggestion channel, where players gave their improvement suggestions, opinions on topics and updates, sent ideas and even concepts for new items and even mechanics that were actually seen by the developers and added to the game. And with enough votes from the community, these suggestions would end up in the Starboard, a channel that contained only the most upvoted ideas and suggestions by the community itself. And I lost count of how many times I saw suggestions with thousands of votes from the public, talking about solutions or alternatives to fix problems that were slowly killing the game. And some even had a step-by-step, and it wasn't anything that hard. Many of them offered solutions that were even extremely simple, but that would definitely work. Several different solutions from the community for the problems of inflation, duplication of items and pets, scam methods, and even the rework of poorly introduced mechanics, like the very poorly planned Ascension system, which was rushed in an attempt to solve the problem of inflation in the economy and ended up creating an even bigger problem than it, and a lot of other options from the passionate community that breathed Grow a Garden and only wanted to see the game improving. 90% of them were not listened. Bad implementations were kept, and attempts to fix the problems they eventually caused seemed even worse. And of the many alternatives the community offered, almost none seemed to be taken into consideration, and something completely different and controversial ended up being added as a fixing measure. But the community didn't just offer intuitive feedback about correcting bad decisions or suggestions with very good ideas. They were also the first ones to alert about the imminent dangers to the lifespan of the game, such as the pet passives that were breaking the game, such as the combination of the toucan with the honeysuckle, giving life to 700 trillion shekel plants that were being duplicated non-stop by duplicated kitsunes and raccoons, inflating the game's economy. They also gave feedback about the unfairness of certain updates being too hard to complete or too tedious and boring, and that this discouraged players who would not longer be interested in seeing the next ones. But how can a game that updates every week, always with new content, be boring? It doesn't make sense, right? Well, it does. When the game was fresh, the devs definitely had several update ideas ready to be put into the game. But the idea of making a brand new update every week from scratch, changing almost everything in the game with a completely different aesthetic and interesting mechanics, would not be sustainable for long. Not to mention the fact that it would always leave the players with very high expectations for these extremely frequent updates. In the first weeks, the updates were always super new and added a lot of things, mainly new mechanics that would later remain permanently in the game, like pets, crafting, recipes, and etc. And everyone loved at the time, but this would not be be sustainable for long, and the community started complaining heavily about these weekly updates, saying they seem to have become more of the same, with mechanics reused from past updates, just with another name and another look, but nothing really new that changed more like what used to be added before. It started to feel more like a new weekly theme with a different skin than an actual update that truly added additional things to the game like the first ones did. And JANDEL himself acknowledged this in the same Discord post in August where he apologized for the Kitsune episode, saying that honestly he was out of good ideas for events since he had been making new events for the past 3 months and therefore was creatively drained. And before that, he had said several people were criticizing the latest updates, saying they seemed rushed, low quality and uninspired, and that it was too hard to always bring good and fresh events. And he also said that due to the absurd growth of Grow a Garden, he had to expand their team size, and they even created a new team that would create new events, giving more development time between each update, which would eventually result in more polished and unique events like the first ones. Of course, JANDEL thought Grow a Garden had potential, that's why he took on the project, but I find it unlikely he thought more than 20 million players will be playing the game at the same time waiting for those updates. But maybe they took too long to expand the team, considering the game was breaking record after record every week, and he knew he would eventually run out of good new event ideas, as he himself said. And lastly, 1 month after that, JANDEL said that Grow a Garden would have a new era. And because of the extended criticism from the community regarding repeated events, they had finally decided that weekly events were too difficult to always keep new and fresh. And he had decided that a new era of Grow a Garden was necessary and more depth in the farms would be implemented. This made everyone believe that the events would stop being weekly and they would instead focus on other more important things. And that made a lot of people happy, including me, because I had the feeling that they were always more focused on creating more and more new things with these new weekly updates, which isn't necessarily bad. However, in the beginning when the game had fewer mechanics and content in general, it was fine. But along with the weekly updates came new problems, new glitches, new exploits that were harming the game in the long term, which didn't have time to be fixed. Precisely because they were more concerned about creating more and more instead of keeping the game balanced and stable, and above all, fun, keeping up with their own updates. But at the end, the events continued being released weekly, in the same way after that. And the community kept insisting that the events were becoming less and less interesting, just with the same mechanics, with different skins. And many other wrong decisions kept harming the game and the players, such as the fact that multiple shadow nerfs happened between updates, without having a log being transparent about these changes with the community, who only asked for transparency from the developers. Also the tax on the shackles transfer between players, which was also very bad received. And even the very mechanic of being able to transfer shackles to another player was criticized, because rich players with money from duplicated plans would also go around distributing infinite shackles to new players, decreasing the value of the currency for those who already had lots of money, and increasing the difficulty for those who played honestly without duplicating shackles and saw the price of all items rise astronomically because of the shackles inflation. The absurd disadvantage of losing even one admin abuse where all the rewards kept getting bigger and bigger each week, because you would fall far behind those who participated in the admin abuses and the rewards they obtained. The massive imbalance in the abilities of certain pets like toucans with tropical category plants that gave life to that honeysuckle worth almost 1 quadrillion shackles that was infinitely duplicated afterwards. That Nihon Zero bug that made pets have their ability cooldowns reduced to just 15 seconds. The cooldown time between quests, cooking, crafting, and event refreshes become longer and longer and more tedious, forcing you to stay in the game as long as possible in a grind that made everything boring and difficult, and mainly the negligence towards the opinions and suggestions of the very community passionate about the game, that would have avoided many of these mentioned problems if they had been listened to more, were just some of the reasons that made the biggest game in Roblox history to lose more than 70% of its players. And and keep losing. But I still have hope that Grow Garden will one day return to its glory days. Consider subscribing and thank you for watching. Your new favorite creator, Bihao.